Hello. Awesome. The music tricked me. I thought it stopped at a specific time and I was ready, and then it stopped just now when I was grabbing a water. But hey, everyone, happy Friday. I see some people on LinkedIn are already tuned in and typing in the comments. Really appreciate you. Also on Twitch and everything. I'm glad y'all are excited for the stream. Um, Feel free to tell me where you're watching in from, and if you've used Eleventy before or if this is your first time hearing about it. Today I'm joined by the maintainer of Eleventy, Zach, and I'd love for him to introduce himself.
Yeah, hey, thanks for having me on. This is great. My name's Zach Leatherman. I am a web developer. I've been a professional web developer since 2006. So yeah, front end from the very beginning and sort of front of the front end for a very long time. And I sort of moved into, I don't know if it's like a full stack role, but definitely like a mix between, or a straddle. I'm like straddling the great divide of front of the front end to back of the front end. So I actually work on Eleventy full time, sponsored by Netlify. So as of last year, so I've been doing that for almost a year now, and it's amazing. It's a dream job for sure.
Love to see it. I would love to see more companies go ahead and like sponsor open source well, I don't know if that's the word, if it's sponsor, support, whatever, hire them in and help them bring in more money. I would love to. So I know this isn't even on the agenda, but like I didn't realize you've been coding since 2006. Perhaps you already told me this before, but I'm curious how you like what the evolution of web development has looked like for you from like 2006 to now, like 2023. Like I learned to code in 2018, so I don't have all that context.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of changes, but I mean, at the same time, not very much has changed if you sort of live at 10,000 feet above it. I think, yeah, when I was sort of coming up or when I started, the biggest component library was the Yahoo user interface library. And Yahoo was like a huge like contributor to the front end space. And you don't really see so much from them anymore, but yeah, I mean, it's not changed very much if you consider that Bootstrap is kind of an evolution of the early YUI or Yahoo user interface library. And a lot of the front end components libraries that exist. I think Shoelace is maybe another one that's built on web components. It's probably in that similar category. I think the JavaScript ecosystem has probably changed quite a bit in terms of like the bundler tools that are available in the sort of investment that's flowing into that tooling space and the single page applications versus multi-page application stuff. But yeah, there's kind of been a few different big sort of epochs, if you will, or eras of front end that have lived through.
Wow, I never even knew about the YUI thing. Like this is my first time hearing about it.
Yeah,
So,
it predated jQuery too.
wow.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. That's awesome. And I think I think your perspective is interesting. Like you're saying, it kind of didn't change. Like the fundamentals didn't really change that much, but we do have like maybe better tooling in JavaScript, or not. Sometimes not better, but additional tooling in JavaScript to make things easier for us. I see a couple people in the chat, like Bakari, want to say hi to Bakari and a few others. Thanks for tuning in. Why don't y'all type in the comment what's your favorite static site generator while Zach and I continue to chat. No pressure to write 11D. So why don't you tell us, Zach, what is 11D?
Yeah, Eleventy is a site generator. I mean, it was originally started to sort of fill the same niche that Jekyll was fulfilling in the Ruby space, but for JavaScript. So my personal website sort of went through a couple of evolutions, as we kind of mentioned before. I was originally on WordPress when I first started my blog, I think back in 2006 or 7. And then I went to Jekyll, I think in maybe 2012. And I wanted something in the JavaScript space because I'm a JavaScript. JavaScript is in my wheelhouse. Or I'm a front of the front end. I had no JavaScript. I knew JavaScript more than Ruby. I was familiar with Ruby a little bit, but yeah, I was really interested in Node.js. So I wanted a Jekyll for Node.js. And that was the origin of it. And yeah, I think I migrated my site to Eleventy in 2017, and that's where it started.
Love it. Love it. Okay, so it was like you were like, I want a static site generator, but for the JavaScript ecosystem. So you were the first, your Eleventy was the first one for okay. But
No, I don't think so. I think it was maybe the first one that borrowed a lot of Jekyll's conventions in
oh
terms of like file system routing and things like that.
gotcha.
Or at least borrowed it heavily as a pre-bundled, like out of the box zero config setup. But yeah, there was a fair number of site generators that existed before Eleventy in the Node.js space, but not really ones that had as much overlap with Jekyll as I wanted.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. Okay, now give us the deets on what WebC is.
Yeah, so WebC is kind of this new template syntax for it for any project. It can exist independent of Eleventy. It's an independent template syntax from Eleventy, but we do also provide an Eleventy integration for it, an Eleventy plugin for it, and it really is a way to server render HTML
Okay.
using conventions that are borrowed from web component standards. So yeah, it's kind of just a new templating syntax that lets you build components in HTML.
Gotcha. Cool. And we have a comment from it's that lady Dev said, I've never heard of WebC before. So glad to
Yeah,
to
it's
bring
brand
it.
new.
Yeah.
It's brand new within the last couple of months. Yeah, we're kind of building it in public, and yeah, it's been great so far.
Nice. Wait, when did you release it? Can you remind me? I know we chatted maybe I feel like maybe October or November, but
Yeah, it was definitely third or fourth quarter in 2022.
okay.
So within the last, I want to say 4 months. I don't know. I don't know the exact date, but yeah.
Gotcha. And then is that lady Dev said what problem does it solve for? I think you kind of answered that, but maybe we could break it down even smaller. I have a question here that says like what are web components? Explain it to like your grandma, your 5-year-old, or someone who's never touched 11D or web components before or something like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very, I want to say, maybe contentious question, because web components is kind of a collection of web standards that tries to bring components to the platform. So it is a number of different things. I think maybe the biggest one that people identify with web components is the custom elements specification, which is just a way to have add interactivity to HTML components. And yeah, we kind of adopt that in WebC as well, and I'll probably go through maybe a demo of that shortly.
Yeah.
But I mean, really, when it comes down to it, I think the unique thing that WebC offers that maybe some other JavaScript framework component implementations don't. So, just as an example, like a React component, for example. WebC is written in HTML, so it uses an HTML parser, and it requires no client-side JavaScript to operate. So it can just output raw HTML. But WebC does have some nice bundling features built into it as well. So nice things for CSS and JavaScript, which I hope to get into in the demo a little later.
All right. I honestly think if you're ready, we can actually transition into the demo. I've heard a lot about it from when we were in the Twitter space and now, and I also read the blog post, and in my head I kept telling myself, I'm gonna try it out, I'm gonna try it out. But I didn't get a chance. So I would love to see it in action whenever you're ready to share your screen. In the meantime, I'll look at some of the comments. We got Fuzzy said, hey, it's Zach.
It's me, I'm here. All right, here I am.
Cool.
I want to switch over to this thing. All right, that's a web server. Here we go. I have an empty folder. So I was kind of just building a project on this folder before, and I deleted everything before we got started. So I'm sure that won't come back to bite me.
Fingers crossed for the demo gods.
Yeah, let me hide this little status bar thing. Here we go. Okay, so just to get started, I'm going to install the new Eleventy beta that just came out this last week. Actually, let's do an npm init so we can get a package JSON. You can see this is empty. And then we'll install Eleventy. Yeah, here we go.
Cool.
And then we'll install the Eleventy plugin for WebC.
While you're doing the install, do you mind me asking you questions, or should I save them for later? Which will be better?
I mean, if I'm capable of answering questions while I'm typing, I am happy to do so. I don't know if I can multitask in that way, but it's possible. Let's try it. No, let's try it. Let's do it.
Okay, challenge. Fuzzy said, what is in the new beta?
Yeah, so I think the two maybe flagship features that are in the new 2.0 beta are our new dev server. So it's a much lighter implementation to replace our previous browser sync dependency. It really shrunk our node modules file weight by almost 80%. So we're like 20% of what we were in the last version, which is kind of nuts. But yeah, and then the other big one is better incremental builds. So our incremental builds are a little bit smarter in the new version and let you sort of build your projects faster.
Nice. Alrighty.
And I'm just going to copy the configuration straight from the Eleventy WebC documentation here. If you go out to the Eleventy documentation on the left panel, there's a template language section, and we just have a WebC section here. And then there's an installation you can click through, and that will sort of go through the steps that I've done so far. So I just pasted the configuration into my configuration file. And I mean, that's really all you need to get started with WebC. I've now started let me zoom this console in a little bit more. I've now started the, oh, that's not using the beta. Oh, let's try this again. Sure, that's fine.
I thought I saw you say at beta.
Beta 1. There's this warning that comes up, and that's a bug with the beta, but it doesn't actually affect anything. So we're just going to roll with that. But yeah, so we have the local dev server running. Mm-hmm. And kind of the interesting thing about Eleventy is that it's very lightweight. If you run it on an empty project, it processes 0 files. It does nothing. So to get started, we have to create a new WebC template. And I'll do that just by making index.webc. And you can see when I save that, it writes a file to my output folder. And this is kind of the basics of Eleventy as a static site generator. It looks for any input files inside of your project and builds them to an output folder. And you can specify that to be whatever you want, but by default, it's _site. And then it serves it through our web server. So if we go back here and refresh our browser, you can see that obviously it's a white screen because there's nothing in this file, but yeah, it's serving from our web server. So I'll just put some HTML boilerplate in here and maybe put a hello. And you can see that it rebuilds and refreshes the web server.
Gotcha.
So that is, this is a WebC page.
Nice.
That's basically all you need to get going with WebC, because it is HTML as its origin. WebC is HTML. So yeah, I mean, that's maybe sort of an interesting thing to it, especially if you're coming from a React background, because I feel like with React, a lot of people get confused about the class name, class attribute mapping, attributes versus properties thing.
That's true.
And everything in WebC is just HTML. It's parsed with HTML. It outputs HTML too. So yeah, there's a very standard one-to-one. Now, typically when you're having an Eleventy project here, you don't necessarily put all this HTML boilerplate in all of your content files. So what I'm going to do now is create an includes folder and use what's called an Eleventy layout. So what I'm going to do is just make a layout.html.
Okay.
And copy this in over here. And then use this. Use a content data value. And that's a special thing in Eleventy that will inject our content from our templates into the layout template. Then in front matter here, I'll declare that I want to use this layout. All right.
So now you're using the HTML boilerplate. Okay, great.
All right. So yes, I need hello here. And so now all of the content that's in this WebC file will now get injected into this layout. So that way I don't have to duplicate this HTML boilerplate in all of my different pages. I can just focus on the content, and each content will reuse that layout for me automatically. Now, of course, I could do all of this in WebC if I wanted just the page to be a component in itself, but this is kind of just showcasing how Eleventy does layouts. And that's kind of an Eleventy feature. So I think what I want to try and build, and I don't know how much time necessarily I have, but actually I'm going to close my Slack down so no one sends me messages. Yeah. Yeah, so I think what I want to do, if I have enough time, is just to build this sort of quintessential button counter component. And I do think it kind of highlights a couple of different unique features of WebC that I think are kind of cool. So inside of the WebC plugin, by default, we have this convention of an underscore components folder. And now you can map this to whatever folder name you want. But if we find any WebC files inside of this underscore components folder, we'll map those to be components you can reuse throughout your content. So what I'm going to do is create a mycounter.webc file, which will make a counter component. And I'm just going to say this is a counter. Maybe the interesting thing to folks coming from other JavaScript frameworks, this doesn't need any HTML, doesn't need a tag, it doesn't need an element, it doesn't need, it can just have text. And that will work as a component. So if I go back to my index.webc page, I can now use that in my content.
Wow, my brain can't even wrap my mind around that.
Yeah, so it's really just. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was like, you put freeform text. I'm like, oh no, he needs to wrap that. But I'm like, no, you don't.
Yeah, and it doesn't. I mean, you could put a bunch of different sibling divs in here. I mean, you could do whatever you want. Right? Just any arbitrary HTML. So you can see that duplicated to 8. But yeah, so I think what we want to do is actually make a button. This, and then me. And so that makes 4 buttons since we have 4 instances of our component over here.
Okay.
And then if we want to style those, as an example, WebC has built-in sort of asset bundling for you. So if it finds any CSS inside of your component, it will actually bundle that up to something you can use on your page. If you wanted to do like a style sheet that only has the CSS for components used on the page. And I'll show how to do that as well. So what I'm going to do is just put some arbitrary CSS in here. Font size 200%. Make those buttons bigger. And of course, that's not going to work because button doesn't inherit. Oh, nope, it's not going to work because we aren't actually declaring this bundle yet. So what we need to do here is page.url and then WebC get CSS. What that does is that takes all of the CSS for the WebC components on your page and outputs it in the head.
Oh.
So if we go back to our page here, oops.
Interesting.
Look inside of our style, we'll see that the CSS for our counter is now declared here. Now, of course, it didn't make the buttons bigger because button doesn't inherit the font size of its parent, but you can see that inside of our body, we have my counter 4 times, we have the button inside, and then the CSS is applied here, so it makes those buttons bigger. Now, the first, like maybe sort of unique, cool feature of WebC is that it can do WebC scoped, and then we can change this to be a host instead of hard-coded to the myCounter file or the myCounter component name.
So it doesn't matter what it's like. You don't have to specify like this is its parent.
Right.
Whatever its parent is, it'll apply that to. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, and so perhaps interestingly, like people that are familiar with Svelte might know where this is going because I think Svelte does something similar, but it generates a class name based on the content of the CSS in the component. Okay. So when you have, even though I have 4 different instances of this my counter on my page, it really only has 1 instance showing up in our CSS bundle. Wow. So yeah, and it reuses that same class name because all of these instances have the same CSS.
That's sick.
Yeah, so another thing you can do that's kind of neat to Eleventy is, or excuse me, unique to WebC is that we have a UID property. Now, when you put a colon in front of your properties, in front of your attributes, excuse me, that makes it a property, which means we use JavaScript to sort of interpret that. And folks that are familiar with Vue single file components will probably understand this convention. But we provide a UID property.
Okay.
That gives us a unique per instance reference. So if we open this up, if I save that, that makes an ID attribute here. Oh. And each one of these is now a unique ID that's unique to the instance.
Gotcha. Okay.
So if I wanted to do like accessibility mapping, so if I want to do like an ARIA mapping between a specific component, but only for 1 instance of that component, I could use this and it would handle it for me automatically. Yeah, you can do it. Maybe a more like an easier use case to understand is the HTML4. Like if you put a 4 on a label to map it to another form element. Yeah. If you want to map that ID between a 4 attribute on the label and the ID on the element itself, you can just use that UID as well in both places. So if I wanted to do like a form label here for, excuse me, colon 4 equals UID, my button, then it would map it in both places. So you kind of see. So the button wouldn't necessarily need to be a child of the label now because they can be independent because they're mapped through this ID.
This is awesome. Once you're done sharing, you will be so happy to see all the comments of everyone being like, "Oh, this is so cool."
Yeah, I feel like I'm going a little bit too slow, but yeah, we'll keep rolling. The other thing I wanted. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said we're in awe. Keep going.
Okay, great. The other thing I wanted to add is just the final thing to show how to add client-side interactivity to the page. So what I'm going to do is just change this to the text here to just be a 1 because we're just going to, just for simplicity, we're going to increment the button value that shows up in, or the text of the button that shows up inside. And we can do that using the custom elements API that I mentioned before. So what I'm going to do is say window.customelements.define, and then this is the also the tag name that we want to use for the component. And this is all just web standard JavaScript code for web components. It isn't anything special to WebC. It isn't anything special to Eleventy. This is just built into the platform. So I have a class here, and this is, I'll add a connected callback, which is a callback that runs when the component is connected to the page. And then what I'm going to do is find the button, which is query selector button. And then I'm going to add an event listener. And then button.innerText equals parse the value of the button. And just increment 1. Maybe I can do, yep, that's fine. Okay. And then, so what WebC does, as I mentioned with JavaScript or with CSS, it finds any JavaScript used in your bundles as well, and then you can output that in your layout wherever you want as well. So what I'm going to go back to do is go into my Eleventy layout file, and I'll add another one for JavaScript. So any JavaScript that's used on the page into this bundle.
Okay.
And again, it will be deduplicated for you. So as many instances as you have of the component, it will only show up once. So we'll do that. We save this. Oops, what did I do? I accidentally deleted something. Okay. So you can see in my script element here, I wish that was a little bigger. There we go. You can see on my script on the page, what I'm actually going to go back here doing changes to type module just to make it scoped correctly and run in the correct order. But so inside my script type module is all the JavaScript used in WebC components on this page. And this binds to my counter elements for me automatically as part of the platform, and I can increment those, and they all have independent values.
Oh,
because each instance is its own thing.
yeah.
So the cool thing about this is that there's no library JavaScript here. There's no library client-side JavaScript that needs to be loaded. We're not extending from anything WebC related on the client. All the WebC stuff happens on the server, and all the client-side JavaScript we wrote is just client-side JavaScript that's inside of our WebC component. And you can see the 4 mapping clicks as well, because it's mapped with that UID. So yeah, that's kind of the crash course in Eleventy to build like that quintessential like number incrementer. And I think it's kind of cool because there's just the only JavaScript on the page is the platform JavaScript that is used by a web standard provided by the platform. There's no library that you need to load or extend.
No, my mind is blown. It's not even kind of cool. It is cool. Do you wanna transition into looking at some of the comments and answering some of the questions?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to remove your screen share, and then I start a few questions. So I'll start with like the people just being like, wow, this is so cool. So it's that Lady Dev said, wait, what? And I think that was when you just put the freeform like content in there without like actually having any tags. Someone said Xdestro said, this is so sick. I love that Eleventy can use WebC as templating with or without assets. They also said, I guess it's time for me to move off Eleventy plugin view. Someone who is a LinkedIn user said, and maybe I should pause if you have any comments, but someone said, I like the blend of HTML and the fact that Eleventy has a similar syntax with most existing frameworks. They also mentioned the speed. Someone said this is so dope. People saying what? I think one person. Oh, and then one person said, I legitimately cannot believe how slick this is without any abstraction layer and without any client side JavaScript other than what you actually write. So
That's a plant. Hey, Henry. How's it going?
Wait, that's your friend. Okay.
I mean, he's very big in the Eleventy community, and he's written a bunch of Eleventy blog posts, which might check.
I love the support.
Yeah, that's great.
No, I think this is sick though. And let me see. There are questions. So I think we already said what's in the new beta. But Kari said, I'm curious how modularization is controlled and achieved with this approach.
Yeah, I mean, all of the client side, or excuse me, all the component code is generated on the server. So you can have as many components as you want. And we actually even have a feature that I wanted to go into, but I didn't think I had time, where you can load WebC components directly from your node modules folder. So what Eleventy is going to do is start, and we've already done this with our syntax highlighter component, but actually, if I can show you on the docs real quick.
Do it.
I can share my screen again.
Yeah.
Share. So if you got to the syntax highlighter documentation, you can actually reference inside of WebC components directly from your node modules folder.
What?
So yeah, inside my WebC project, I can use a syntax highlighter component directly from npm, as long as the npm module is installed and the plugin is installed on Eleventy. Yeah, you can use that directly. So that's kind of a cool way to sort of ship components that other people can use. And Eleventy will start to, I think, maybe definitely provide more components out of the box. I want to do an Eleventy image WebC component for automatic image optimization as well.
Gotcha. That's awesome. I'm excited to see what comes next.
Yeah.
Let's see what other questions we have. I think maybe one person didn't really understand that Eleventy is already rolled out, but I wanted to provide clarity there. They said, when is Eleventy rolling out?
Yeah, the Eleventy beta that just came out this week is like the more stable version of the APIs that sort of work with this new WebC syntax library. And so, yeah, I would say you can try it out definitely today. But Eleventy's been around for quite a few years.
Yeah. This part's not new. The WebC part is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see what other questions. Someone said, is it compatible with utilities like Tailwind or Lit HTML? I'd fall in love right away.
Yeah, we don't have any out-of-the-box integrations, but again, WebC is just HTML. So anything you can do in HTML, you can do with Tailwind or Lit. I want to have some good examples about how to, I mean, you can just reuse your Tailwind classes directly in WebC. There shouldn't be any problem with that. But I do want to have some more examples about how to generate Lit components with WebC. I think that would be a cool integration. So look for that moving forward.
Ooh, something to look forward to. And then Ali said, hey, as far as I understand, WebC doesn't generate an actual custom element using the component spec. Would you ever consider tweaking behavior so actual web component custom elements are output?
Now, there's a little bit of nuance to that question that I might need some clarification.
Okay.
We don't actually generate any client-side JavaScript for you to define those custom elements. That's correct. And that's because the WebC baseline for a component is just HTML, or actually just arbitrary text. So that's true that we don't ship any sort of code generation for you for that sort of custom element definition. And maybe we will moving forward, but I think that might be a leaky abstraction. I don't know. I think we probably have to have some hard discussions about whether or not that would be a good abstraction to have, but definitely open to those discussions.
Awesome. Great. Someone said, "Well, I could use this on a project I'm working on right now. Saves me a lot of time." And your friend said, "Progressive enhancement."
Yeah, HTML. HTML is the best.
All right. I think that was. Oh, they also said, "Where's my check?" That seemed like a question.
Send me your Venmo.
Someone said, "How would you load data from the server into WebC?"
Yeah, I mean, Eleventy is one of Eleventy's unique features that we have, like this data cascade feature that really allows you to set data in a whole bunch of different places. There are no mechanisms right now to automatically import data to the client.
Okay.
So if you want to serialize some JSON inside of a WebC component, you could certainly do that. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And you could even do it in a script tag, and then it would bundle to the client the same way we've already said. But there are no automated mechanisms to do that for you right now, because I really think that having a library independent sort of separation between the server and the client is probably an important thing for performance moving forward. But we might add some utilities to make that nicer in the future if enough people make noise about it.
Nice. And I'll just ask two more questions and that from the audience, and then we can move on to the next segment. Someone said, I hope I'm not making you repeat yourself, but I just want to make sure people's questions get answered. Can I use WebC component in Eleventy without explicitly reusing its style every time? I think that's a good question.
Yeah, as I sort of demoed, I think the sort of maybe cool thing about the Eleventy asset bundling, or excuse me, the WebC asset bundling thing, is that it dedupes those styles for you automatically. So you only have one instance of that style that shows up in your bundle, no matter how many instances of the component are on the page. And that's, I think, maybe one of the biggest complaints that I've had with the declarative shadow DOM stuff that's coming from web standards right now, is that it seems like a lot of that stuff needs to be duplicated throughout your page a bunch of different times. And you can almost think of WebC as like a compiler that sits a layer above that and deduplicates all that stuff for you automatically.
Cool. And then one person asked, the last question is, can those components grab focus from tab or whatever? I think, are they saying like when you do like tabbing for accessibility?
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. So I think one of the big complaints about Shadow DOM in particular, and Shadow DOM is like maybe a more advanced feature of web components that we haven't gone into. And WebC sort of exists before Shadow DOM. We work with Shadow DOM if you're using it. But I think one of the big complaints with Shadow DOM historically has been the accessibility concerns of Shadow DOM content. And because WebC sort of exists as a pre-compiler for that stuff, all of the output is just HTML. There's nothing that exists in Shadow DOM. So all the output has the same accessibility benefits that you'd see from just standard HTML, independent of Shadow DOM. So I would say, yeah, it's good to go. You can tab through those buttons, no problem.
Cool. I hope we interpreted it right. But yeah, cool. All right. Okay. I just have a few more questions for you. I hope I'm not exhausting you with all the questions. But like one of my questions were like, who particularly or specifically do you think this would benefit? Which type of developer or what type of like goals will this developer have for their particular project?
Yeah, I think maybe the unique space that Eleventy lives in specifically is that it really represents my background as a front end developer. And I'm sort of crossing the line, and I feel like maybe an imposter in the JavaScript world in a way. But I really do feel like that the web is a huge tent. There's a ton of people trying to get into web development right now, and I don't think necessarily the best way to get into web development is through JavaScript first. I think the best way to get into web development is HTML and CSS first. Um, and that's really the space that Eleventy tries to live in. And I think WebC tries to live in that same space as well. I really want it to be as easy as possible for folks to use
Yeah.
components without having to go all in on JavaScript.
Yes, I love that. No, you're completely right. I do think this for beginner developers and front end developers. I have had some conversations with people that said they prefer to start with like back end over front end, like when they learn to
Mhm.
code. But for me, it was really like instant gratification of like I wrote an HTML thing, it pops up, and I'm not like in the console being like, what is this? How is this a computer program? So yeah, I agree with you that like HTML and CSS is like a easier reach for most beginner developers.
Yeah, it's the gateway.
Yeah, the gateway drug. um, my other question to you is, what if people wanted to contribute and join in the fun of 11D and WebC? How can they do that?
Yeah, I think that the great thing about WebC is that it's brand new, so I'm really open to a wide range of feedback from people with varying backgrounds, and you can have a pretty big influence, I think, on the future of WebC if you just try it out and let me know what you
Yeah.
think about it, what you liked, what you didn't like, and yeah, that could really influence the library moving forward because yeah, it's really early stages for sure. We just came out with it a couple months ago. So, yeah, we're still iterating, still getting feedback from folks, and trying to ship new features on it. So, yeah, just trying it out, I think, is the most helpful thing. But I would also love a star on GitHub. If anybody has any extra spare stars that they want to give away for the Eleventy project, that would be awesome.
All right, y'all. I'm about to grab the link to it if I can find it fast enough. And let's go ahead and you want us to start the Eleventy project or the WebC project? Is there a repo for WebC or is it just all in one?
Yeah, it's all under the Eleventy org, but I think the Eleventy core repo is probably the most useful thing to star.
Okay,
Um,
let me put
but
it.
WebC would be good too. Give me all the stars. I want just stars everything. Star everything, please.
Start everything, y'all. If if you want to make an impact, this is a nice small way to do it. Go ahead and go to like github.com/11d/11d and also like go to 11d itself, the org, and check out the other repos. Go ahead and give it a star. I'll give it one right after this stream. It's a nice thing to do. If you can't contribute code or money, a star is nice. Do you have, and then my last question for you is like, do you have any advice for folks who would like to gain more like you've done a great job at like gaining contributors, gaining like sponsors and like general clout and like just Netlify being able to be like, you know what, we're willing to like we want you to be part of the Netlify community. So do you have any advice on like how people can get their open source projects out there more?
Yeah, man, I think it really depends on your personality. Just speaking from my experience personally,
Yeah.
uh, I am maybe not the most confident person. I get really anxious when I do releases. So I really think that just putting yourself out there and putting code out there and doing open source and doing software releases is kind of an act of bravery in a way,
Yeah.
because you are really opening yourself up to feedback and criticism. And uh, I think that the best thing that I've done is to be as friendly as I can to folks, and that
Yes.
builds a community of friendly folks that like to hang around other friendly people. And that is maybe the secret, the real secret to the success of Eleventy is that the community is just awesome and
Yeah.
nice, and it really is sort of a self-sustaining thing in that way because nice begets nice.
Yeah.
And if we can keep that going, I would consider that a huge win.
Yes, I love that. Yeah. And the community is nice because the person who created the community or maintains it is
Trying my best.
and like I think you made a great point. I think many of us as developers, we're not always the most like loud. We can be sometimes more on the introverted side or the shy side. So there are like just being nice to people on the internet can get you far. I agree. And I think you've done a great job at like I feel like you like I don't know if I'm making this up, but like you show yourself building stuff and learning in public, whether it's like through blogs or something. I don't know if I made that up. I think I think you have like shown that progression over time, and I think that helps as well.
Yeah, I was not always as willing to learn in public as I necessarily am now, but even now it makes me anxious to admit that I didn't know things.
Yeah.
But I think everyone has that experience, so the more honest that everyone can be, the more people will learn and the better we'll be.
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. Okay. So, I'm going to transition away from some of the technical ish, like the open source questions, and ask you some fun questions that I usually ask many of the guests. So, my first question is if you could eat one food every day for the rest of your life, what would it be? It's a hard question.
I mean, ignoring the health concerns of me eating just one.
Yeah, like your body is gonna be like completely fine.
Strawberry cheesecake, Ben& and Jerry's ice cream.
Oh,
Easily.
okay.
That's my favorite ice cream. So, yeah,
I
I
love
would eat that every day.
I love that choice. That's a good one. Okay, my next question to you is I think you might have actually answered this throughout this conversation, but what was the first programming language that you ever learned?
I mean, my first thought was HTML, but I don't think that that's actually true because, my family had, like, a Apple IIe growing up and a Commodore 64, and I think that the actual first program that I wrote was maybe in QBasic.
Okay.
Um, I
Wow.
don't know. That's maybe dating myself, but that's
Okay.
fine.
Nice. No, I I think I kind of learned HTML from MySpace, but then when I like intentionally learned to code, it was SQL. I don't know why. I didn't know what coding really was, and I was like, "Oh, I think this is coding SQL."
Yeah, it is. Why not?
You got a really nice comment. Someone said you were doing a wonderful job. Thanks a lot. We need people like you to share your experience to newcomer in the arena of programming. Yeah.
Thank you.
And then my last non-technical question to you is what is your favorite Beyonce song?
Oh, man. Okay, so I'll admit that maybe this might be the hardest question that I've had to answer so far. I don't necessarily think that I'm, like, maybe the biggest, super fan of Beyoncé, but I will say that I do like the Single Ladies song, if
Yeah,
nothing else for the, dance choreography. It's, like,
that's a
iconic.
good
Come on, you gotta do the so good.
one. That's a really good one. That's a fun song. All right. Thank you so much, Zach, for coming on and joining us. I hope I didn't take up too much of your time. We might have ran a little bit over, but I really appreciate it. I think everyone who's tuning in really appreciated it too. I also want to thank the people who watched us. Thanks for your comments and your engagement and your kind words. It's really encouraging. And I don't know if you have any last things you want to plug or say, but
Just build for the web.
build for the web. I like ending on that note. All right, y'all. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye.